All right, what's going on, everyone? Progress Node 14 here. Got Altamash here. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. It's been a while since we've done this, so I'm excited for this one.
Yes, yes. We thought about a couple topics that we can talk about over the last 2 weeks. Let it simmered, in our thoughts, and yeah, definitely excited to get into this topics. So let's start with our reflections of this year, 2023. Also, kind of turn into a New Year's episode then about maybe what we've learned about our own journeys, the things we've tried, and I think we'll do another progress note in January where we can talk about trends and kind of what our goals are for 2024. But at least I think it'd be good to kind of hear our reflections, and that way the listeners can also kind of join us on that journey as they think about maybe their progress or things that they need to change going into the new year.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. You want to go first?
Yeah. Let me think here. So the biggest thing for me, I think, is that I realized I have been, I've been steadily making progress as far as like strength and things. And as of recent, it was more of, let me get more cardio involved. I was listening, to that Andy Galpin episode with Dr. Huberman. And when you start to hear these experts talk about having more balanced approach to training, that was something I was
Hmm.
definitely getting more interested in. So we'll get more to that with kind of the Morpheus training and all that. The other thing I realize is kind of just about data, right? I mean, there's so much data out there right now in the world with any wearable that you choose. And so, I had the Whoop, I had 8 Sleep, you got Apple showing you steps and other data. And I got to a point where I realized what worked and what didn't. And I wanted to focus not necessarily less on my own health, but not thinking about my own health as much, if that makes sense. Like every day was like, get up and, oh, what am I going to do at the gym today? Right. That's like my first thought all day, every day is like, what's that win? And now it's been more of, okay, I know what works and doesn't work for my recovery, for sleep, for nutrition, all that type of stuff, that I can now just go into the gym, simplify it, get simple data that works, and stick with that. And, that's the biggest reflection I think that has really just helped me maintain and actually get my goals is, simplicity is the ultimate perfection, as Da Vinci would say.
Oh, I like that. I don't know if I've ever heard that one before. Um, that's dope, man. I think, yeah, I mean, I would probably put multiple buckets in terms of things that have really that I've changed my perspective on quite a few things. I think obviously the training and the health perspective in terms of how we approach nutrition and exercise and that kind of stuff. We spent a lot of time talking about that because those are foundations. From a career perspective, I think this year talked about 1 year in as attending and that growth, and we spent some time talking about the transition, light of the end tunnel, so to speak. And from a personal and family relationship standpoint too, that I think about, as you see, I threw this thing
Mm-hmm.
behind me in terms of kind of recognizing that time is the ultimate commodity for me, and it's not necessarily finances, whatnot. Recognizing, very privileged to be able to say that, so blessed in that regard. But um, I think kind of just to piggyback off you with training, the value of NEAT, right, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, I think is tremendous. So people are probably familiar with this, at least listeners of this show, and we've talked about these studies that have come out over the last couple of years, things showing the daily step count, right? There's kind of this inflection point, and when you get to about 8,000 steps per day, and really it doesn't matter. Steps is just an easy metric for us to kind of track in terms of activity, right? But the other thing that I think from the Galpin Huberman series that you're talking about, exercise snacks. Remember those that they talked about? Really love that, right? Just a 60-minute bout of something, 60-minute, excuse me, 60-second bout of something extreme. That's
That's
not
it.
much of a snack, is it? Um, of something really intense throughout the day, whether it's like sprinting up 2 flights of stairs, and hopefully take you 60 seconds, but just quickly drop down and like, I don't know, do like 50 push-ups or whatever the challenge is for you, or just 50 jumping jacks or something like that to introduce that during the day. I think that actually it's the role is severely underappreciated for people. So that's something that I've been very cognizant of, particularly uh, the last quarter of this year, and I'll kind of mention to you what I noticed in terms of like the physique transformation in that regard. With the career standpoint, um, yeah, I stand with this. I talk to students and residents and trainees that I work with, is like, it doesn't really matter how many years of training you end up doing, because people ask me, I work with a lot of medical students, that, hey, like, should I do a 4-year program or a 3-year program? Like, I think of a really close friend right now, and she's considering emergency medicine programs, and she is, as EM is either 3-year or 4-year,
Mhm.
or the 4-year the academic programs. And recently I was like, listen, you should not be doing a 4-year program, because you're ready to practice, not in the sense that you're ready to be attending tomorrow, but it doesn't matter whether you do a 3-year program or a 4-year program. You're going to leave and you're going to come become an attending, and you're going to feel just as ill prepared. And that first year and year and a half and 2 years, which you're going to find out soon, that learning curve is incredibly steep. So be patient with yourself there. You're going to mess up a lot. You're going to have a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm a pretty confident person, and I'm lucky that I've hadn't experienced that. But I think as an attending, I so much imposter syndrome, that I have a different sense of empathy for the people who don't kind of project that type of confidence, such as I do. And then from a personal standpoint, the timepiece that we talked about. But I'm actually curious to think about this, because you're fan of Sahel Bloom as well. Sahel Bloom,
Mhm.
I think, recently had a kid. So, I mean, his kid's probably a year, 2 years, or somewhere in that range. And he just talks about the value of spending that time. This one thing that he has on Instagram all over the place, where he shares that you're your kid's favorite person for the first 10 years of their life, right? And afterwards, like, they have new favorite people, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, other friends, but you no longer are the most important person in their life.
Mhm.
Um, and so the emphasis he's trying to make is, hey, cherish this time, don't waste it, right? Like, don't do other crap that you think is important, but it's really not important. But in the same respect, I think there's another point, either a podcast or maybe a series of messages that he had, where he was talking about the value of hard work that he appreciated by watching his father grind, and not being there for dinner sometimes, and not being there for X, Y, and Z. And I mean, those things are kind of at odds with each other if you think
Mhm.
about that. Right? Like,
Yeah.
in this fantasy world, we're like, okay, when I'm working late and it's 7 p.m. and I know I got to get home, but, like, I got to get this paper in, or I got to get these notes in, or, like, there's something to follow up on. And that's something that I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about. So I'm actually curious to see if that's something that you were familiar with, and how you would think about that.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. That concept I've seen everywhere now. So I also saw a clip on Instagram of Tim Grover, who coached Kobe, D Wade, Michael
Yeah,
Jordan,
yeah,
all those
yeah,
guys, and he talks
yeah.
about how his daughter, when she was really young, would say, "Oh, Daddy, can't you stay home, please?" And he was like,
Absolutely.
"Sorry, I got to put
Yeah.
food on the table." And 20 years later, again, she appreciated the fact of seeing him grind, and he talks about how that was instilled in her. Tim Ferriss recently just had a guest on, and he was talking about there was this great quote. I need to find it, but essentially the concept was every day we wake up as humans, and we can either choose or try to choose to enjoy and enjoy the day and reap the benefits of what we sowed, or go out and create value to the world, right? And there's this internal struggle that every human has is this concept of time and saying, well, in 1,000 years, nothing's going to matter. Who cares of the value that I put out? Let me enjoy it versus, going out and making the world a better place and feeling like you've done something before you've passed. And so, yeah, I think I think, again, I'm going to go with the Gary V idea here of you have to do both really, really extremely hard. So that way, when you stretch the rubber band on both sides, it snaps back to the middle, so that you have that balance. But yeah, I don't think there's one right way to look at it. I think it is important to kind of do both of those things, and through action, through guidance, through words to the kids, so that they learn both sides of that spectrum.
Right on, dude. Yeah, yeah. I love that. Balance is that key word, right? That's the buzzword always. Hard to obtain, but I guess good to strive for in really everywhere. And again, the thing we talked about with Kelly Starrett way back when, balance is kind of your brief, very, very brief period, and the pendulum's kind of in the middle, where balance is, quote unquote. And so, yeah, I think that's really realistic. Again, life is dynamic, life is fluid, and you kind of have to roll with the punches in the regard. I plug that in foreshadowing, because this kind of makes me become a fan more of a Morpheus, which we'll again talk about.
Yeah, yeah.
I know we're both super excited to talk about that, because we've been using it. So maybe anything else in terms of reflections in 2023 as we're winding down, that you think is something really, really valuable. If I could ask you, I know you're going to hate this because we're context people. If I could say, hey, Darsh, give me one thing. Okay, screw it. Three things. I'll give you three things. Three things that you think are the most valuable things that you learned from this year that you would pass on to somebody? Let's just say, because we have interns who are in undergrad, right? So less than
Ooh,
10
yeah.
or more than 10 years down from us. And so those guys are listening. I know they're listening right now. So
Okay.
three things that we're talking to our interns that we'd pass down.
Ooh, it's a little tough. Okay, let's say one, have self-respect. I've truly found, I think that is the meaning of life. The purpose of life is to live life on your terms, right? Which leads me to my second one is be an outlaw, right? You can follow the rules and, well, you can be good or you can go far by breaking, like not breaking the rules, but creating your own rules. And I mean that in the workplace. I mean that in your own personal life. I mean, in your relationships, like you don't have to follow a step-by-step guide of whatever people are putting out there on social media. And so create your own rules, which will help you with, better, clear thinking. And then third thing I'll say is sit down with yourself. This all ties in with the self-respect, but at least 10 minutes a day. It can be through a form of meditation or whatever, but just get away from all the stimulus out there. I think we're heading into a world where people are struggling with mental health because they can't sit with themselves. They can't internalize their thoughts because most human thoughts are going to be depressing because it's about survival. And when you have Instagram, when you have TikTok, when you have work, when you can constantly find something else for input into your mind, you're just not going to be able to validate your own thoughts, and so you got somebody else controlling you.
Amazing. You always nail those questions, man. I like the self-respect one. The way when I heard you say that, like what's the spark that I get in my mind is kind of with self-respect, like identify what your core priorities are,
Mm-hmm.
or core priority is, and then fight tooth and nail to try to protect that guard. Because if you don't, then other people are going to come and just completely take that away from you and just divert you in all kinds of directions, particularly as you advance further and you gain knowledge and you have stuff to offer to people.
Mm-hmm.
People can take. And so you have to know what North Star is and stuff. And don't let people like push you off that lane too
For
much.
sure.
I mean, every
Yeah.
now and then, of course, but I think that's something that I've been struggling with and I'm also working on actively and I'm getting better at.
Yeah. Nice.
And so that's 2023, number one, I think for me. Number two, I would say, don't be so sure of yourself. So that's another way for me to say be open minded, right? I think we've talked about this a lot. I think still it's pinned on my feet in terms of being kind of open minded and different approaches to different people. I mean, so the most recent thing comes up, right? I mean, that's top of mind for everybody. People get ready for the elections. People are getting ready for. I mean, you've got this war going on overseas, and however you end up defining it, and people are so sure they know what the facts are, what the answers are,
Right.
and we're gonna have a guest coming up that we're gonna talk about at least some of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say, don't be so sure. You probably like whenever you think the story started, it probably started before that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's another one. And then lastly, I would say, hmm, I would say, I think about something Max Shank way back when in the archives
Wow.
talk
You're
about.
you're you're really going back there, man. Kelly Starrett, Max Shank.
Well, people say good things and they stick with
Yeah.
you, or they come back to you as like as you in different
Yeah.
phases in life, right? Just like
For
books and
sure.
stuff, things quotes come back to you. Remember Max talking at some point about like people all are striving for a few things, right? It's power, love.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what else, but I think no matter what a person's going through, whether it's pain, whether it's anguish, whether it's joy, whatever. Typically, love is a central thing. This is going to might turn some people off here, but I think so. Identifying uh, the closest to you. Again, we talked about Sahel Bloom a second ago, right? He has this really amazing graph series of like how people spend time, like over time, like how much time they spend with their kids and friends and family and work and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with respect to love, also learn how to love yourself because the most time you spend over in that graph is with yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like incredibly. And so if you can't love yourself and you can't love the person in the mirror, that's going to be very, very difficult. So,
Sure.
yeah, I
I like
hope we
that.
don't lose many people there.
No, I think that's great, man. I think that's awesome. Yeah.
So let's talk about what we're excited about, man. Before
Yeah.
I think we get into the goals, we'll close with that. Let's talk about Morpheus. Maybe you started with this. I'm curious, like, why was this on your radar for a while? Like when you picked it up, and maybe start with like telling people what the heck Morpheus is,
Yeah.
except for
Yeah.
the guy from the Matrix.
Right. So Morpheus is a heart rate training system, heart rate variability training system, right? So it's actually a chest strap that you wear every morning. You check your HRV and then you wear it during your workouts. And so essentially it's teaching you how to be in your targeted heart rate zones. So in the recovery zone, right, with lower heart rate, you want to be in there for a longer time. And then there's conditioning zone, which we know probably zone 3, zone 4, which you want to be in, about 10 to 20 minutes. And then there's an overload, which is where you're really pushing yourself. Your heart rate's going to be close to your max. And that's going to be a little bit less than even that conditioning. For me, it's about, 6 to 8 minutes. And so every week it gives you these targets to hit. And the whole purpose is to promote recovery, it's to promote training. And the cool part about it is that every day, if you have a low recovery, it's going to change. So you'll get your targets will be lower. So for instance, if I wake up, I have great recovery. In order for me to get into that middle zone, I might need to hit a heart rate of 150. But let's say the next day I wake up, my recovery is shot maybe at like 70, 60, 70%. That 150 will go down in order to hit that zone 3, zone 4, maybe to 140. And so it's really individualized, which is nice. And so you don't risk overtraining. And it really, honestly, by using it, I feel great. So let me kind of give the backstory. You're talking about it wasn't on my radar. So I first started hearing about Morpheus just through Instagram, right? I didn't even know who Joel Jameson was, but he seems like, he's a big time player in the strength and conditioning world, trained a lot of MMA athletes who are world champions and things. And his programming is supposed to be fantastic. But what's funny was I was talking about my reflections. I made tremendous strength gains, right? To the point where I'm like, I don't even know if I really need to do anything above and beyond to where I am now, right? I'm pretty advanced in terms of like all my lifts. And I realized I wanted to get back to cardio. The 30s, I wanted to get back to being lean. I was a really good track runner back in the day. I wanted to get back to that kind of, VO2 max and conditioning and whatnot. And I saw a thread from someone who wrote, men usually suffer from cardiovascular disease compared to women, and they're the ones who should be, doing more cardio than weightlifting, whereas women
Mm.
suffer from osteoporosis or an osteopenia, and they should be the ones, incorporating more weightlifting. And I was like, obviously more context needs to be there, but yeah, pretty true, right? And so I was like, maybe I do need to incorporate this a little bit more. Holiday sale was there for Morpheus. I saw that it's not subscription based; it's a one-time pay of like around $100. I was like, amazing. Let me try this out. And I knew having a heart rate monitor would be more accurate than, let's say, the Whoop. And for those who've been longtime listeners, I've been wearing the Whoop. But again, as I mentioned, I didn't need that much data. I wanted limited data. I'm very data driven, but so I needed targets. I need numbers to like hit. And so this was the perfect system for me.
Yeah, and you posted about this too, right? In terms of
Yeah. So,
gamification of the process.
right.
I mean, gamification usually always makes these types of things more feasible in terms of
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the process, right? And
Right.
if the process is going to be fun, you're likely to stick to it, and if you stick to it, consistency is what leads to outcome. So that's just me taking the fun out of everybody for for them. Um, yeah, big bit of background on Joel Jameson. Joel Jameson, I think we've mentioned this before in the strength and conditioning or performance realm. Like people have little niches, right? Right. You have Eric Cressy with the shoulder and elbow
Mm-hmm.
baseball, right? Dan Pope, all those guys, right? They're kind of like well-rounded performance rehab. They've been here. But Joel Jameson, I think 15 to 20 years last time, like his whole thing has been conditioning, and he's working with every single elite level, including Navy SEALs, UFC, and
Mm-hmm.
like other that you mentioned. And again, optimizing their conditioning, like also as a consultant to come in, it's like, how do we get somebody over the hump, right? Again, people at the top 0.01% already. So yeah, I mean, he came up with this, and this is not, I think, his first rendition. He's come up with other
Mm-hmm.
products in the past before, and so I've followed his work, and he has somewhat unique philosophies too. But I think this is the first time that we came up and starting to appreciate recovery a little bit more. I think my favorite part about this is kind of, you mentioned that it's so dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So as we mentioned, I think one of the the most profound lessons for somebody to learn in terms of their growth of training over time is that um, you have to be flexible, and for people such as us who are very much type A, and probably most people who listen to this, and they like to be regimented, they like to be data driven like you talked about, and they like to have a plan. And what's really difficult and makes you feel like you're losing sense of control is when you have to veer off the plan because life came and hit you in the face, and there's no better way to experience that than having a kid. And so me getting that sense of, okay, I like that, and then something letting me know that, okay, all right, this is not the day for you, this is not the week for you. Like not only will the day shift, but the whole week will
Mm-hmm.
shift. um Now, getting used to that aspect of it, like that psychological piece is still somewhat challenging, but I think because this gamifies it, that makes it a bit easier. It facilitates that psychological transition. So that's my favorite part of it, I think. I've only been using it for a week, and it was per your recommendation. I'm a huge fan
Mhm.
of it. I don't love the fact that during the strength training zone, it doesn't necessarily give
Yeah.
you. So that's a little bit annoying. But I do
Right.
full body workouts, which end up being heavy cardio workouts anyway. I'm always in my conditioning zone during my stuff,
Mm.
so that works out. But if I went to more of like a upper lower split or body part split, like I don't know if that would work out well. So that's what I'm a big fan of. I'm also like finding it interesting in terms of the feedback that I get, because I always thought that like sleep. I mean, look, I'm not gonna tell people sleep is not important, but I thought that like, okay, if I'm not getting certain hours of sleep, that I should automatically adjust my workouts. And with getting this data, like you're like, no, I can actually still push myself, despite me feeling like subjectively I haven't gotten the quality of sleep that I thought I did, right? And I think that's another huge benefit of that. It's like, no, you actually slept better than you think you did. I think we've talked about recall bias being such a problem for nutrition in people. I think that's the same thing with sleep. To be honest with you, is recall bias is not very good in terms of did you sleep poorly, did you sleep, that could. For me, interestingly, it's about the timing of the day. Like I might have mentioned this to you before, but like if I get 8 hours of sleep between the hours of midnight and 8, it's far less optimal than getting 6 hours between 10 and you know 10 and 6. So no, that's bad math. Sorry, 10 and 4. Um, so that's another interesting piece that I've learned. Of like, okay, it's actually shifting the timing of training and waking up and stuff might help me get less sleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's important to note that I think the Morpheus is way more subjective as far as taking your subjective data, so the quality of your
True.
sleep, how sore you are, and the hours of your sleep into your recovery score compared to, let's say,
Yep.
Whoop and maybe even Aura, where it's truly just based off the day prior, the week, and how hard you worked out and whatnot, of your strain score. So, which I didn't
Yeah.
realize. Remember, because I remember we had an episode, I forget with who it was, and um, you were really talking about the readiness score and how that's a big factor. Um, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I've definitely realized that hey, if I feel good, like okay, cool, I can crush it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I'd be curious actually to compare this with my Aura Ring to see kind of because again, you also notice like the HRV numbers are always different. Because I remember you asking Luisa about this a while back because you were with your Whoop, you were constantly in the 50s,
Yeah, 40
right?
maybe mid 40s. I'm in
40s and
70s
50s.
now. Yeah, I'm in the 70s.
And I saw you recently post about this. You're in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I don't think all the stuff calculates. And I'll tell you why. Like my HRV with this is around kind of in the 80s and stuff. And there was a point where the Aura Ring would register me. I think my peak was 194.
Mm.
So, either I mean, it's something legendary happened with me that one night, or like, but I was always in the
Got bit by
hundred
a
something. So I
spider.
think, yeah, I think that the way the report is a little bit interesting. So I think that's also something people should keep in mind is like, it doesn't translate one to one with these different, data, data feedback devices. Um, I want to go back to kind of really quick about the neat part that I was talking about.
Hmm.
One thing I really let loose over the last year or two with like all the transitions in life and being a dad and whatnot. Maybe some excuses, but I learned of just like incorporating, in terms of I went on vacation in Canada when I told you, and I ended up taking like 100,000 steps that week,
Hmm.
and doing making no other changes, including no significant exercise because I was like dealing with some back issues. Just that type of activity. I mean, I came back from vacation and I was like 6 pounds lighter. Right, like now, granted, I had a lot of weight to lose, and there was not all like body fat. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying what I've noticed is actually not to toot my own hair, but in the last 2 months and 19 days, 21 pounds from just honestly making subtle changes and being more cognizant of like how we're approaching training, and just being pushing yourself, and
Hmm.
obviously like it really depends on where your baseline is. If you have a lot to lose, it's going to be far easier. We're not going to make this a physique bodybuilding thing,
Sure.
although that's going to come in the very near future in 2024 for people. So stay tuned. But yeah, I wanted to also like again emphasize that the knee piece of it, because people do struggle with it. You and I both treat people who are in pain and cannot push themselves in exercise, and it's just really, it can be simple as perfection, as
Yeah.
you say. That who says Voltaire? Who is
Da
it?
Vinci.
Da Vinci. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I do
Yeah.
love Voltaire
So,
though. We do. We both do.
um, sweet man. So, anything else on that front, or if not, then we could kind of look ahead and see what's coming up exciting.
No, yeah, I think no, I echo everything you said. I feel like even my aesthetics and thing, physique, like I feel good incorporating that cardio. And of course, there's that tie-in too. I mean, we talked a lot about the interference effect, and that gets into the nitty gritty of things about zone two versus zone five, and maybe we can save that for another day with someone who's more of an expert than we are. To kind of talk
Hmm.
about that for those advanced athletes or anyone that's listening to this podcast about really optimizing their cardio in with their strength training. But yeah, let's transition kind of into your goals. I know you just mentioned a lot of weight loss and stuff, but what are you doing right now as far as your training goals? I know you're preparing for something.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, I'll kind of break this into micro and macro cycles. I think for me right now, I'm kind of working on this physique thing to kind of get back to see where we can get to in terms of a reasonable body fat percentage. Particularly with me, I do struggle with a little bit of the visceral fat, and obviously
We're
that's
South
important,
Asian,
right?
man.
We're South Asian, right? We got the adipose adipose tissue overflow hypothesis going on, and but I've got pretty extensive cardiovascular history and stuff. And I think, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but at some point, like I'd consider getting on a statin as well.
Hmm.
Um, I'll talk about that maybe a different day in terms of my experience and whatnot. And so I'm incentivized in that regard because I just, you know, uh, bottom line for people, I didn't tolerate it well because of some of the side effects. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe if we get this handle and we don't need to be on some pharmacological agents. So from the personal standpoint, that's awesome. I think that I would say I'm really enjoying being as strong and lean as I've been in the last 2 to 3 years. And so we're going to continue working on that probably for another 2 or 3 months until we get to a point, where I want to shift gears. And again, my friend who I was mentioning earlier went to go support the Philadelphia Marathon. Dude, I've covered a lot of marathons before in the tent, and that's a different experience when you're covering as or like you're supporting as a fan. It's wild, how like the whole city comes out to support.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting experience. Like, just cheering for people that you've never met and you probably will never see again, but just like you're cheering, like it's awesome. But anyways, like after that, I got so stoked and I was like, man, I got to do something now. No freaking way I'm running a marathon, but there is a charity bike event, that's going to be from Philly all the way down to the shore in Jersey, which is going to be about 65 to 70 miles or so. And again, it's for like American Cancer Society coming up in June. So I'm going to start training for that. It's not a race, of course. In my mind, I need to crush it. So that's
Yeah.
the main reasons. Like right now, for my Morpheus goals is maintaining cardio, and then probably around February or so, 4 months out, maybe March, we'll start to really push it. I'm gonna invest in a bike as well, a road bike,
Nice.
which I don't know if you know, they're expensive as
Oh
shit.
yeah.
By the way, they're very expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that gives you something to kind of again look forward to train for a specific purpose, and switch it up.
Yeah. I like that, man. Nice.
What about you?
No, just training for life still. Still gonna be cutting a
Training for
little
life.
bit. But we'll see January. I think till February, March, maybe continue on the kind of physique stuff, and we'll see where I am as far as where I am strength wise. Um, but yeah, I think same for me, right? A lot of the cardiovascular history. Um, so got to check in with my doctor. Maybe I'll do some more tests, kind of check my omega 3 again and LP little A and or not the LP little, but the ApoB and whatnot, and kind of see where to go from there. But 30s, man, it's always like, all right, 30s are the decade for getting the house in order in a way. So
Hmm.
yeah.
And then maybe I know we're kind of on the health and fitness kick there, but you wrap up training. You're going to
Yes.
be done in 24. Wrap up training. So, uh, you know, should we tell people where you're headed? I
Oh
think
yeah, yeah. They
it's
know
not
from
a
the
secret.
Stacy
Yeah,
episode, I think, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
heading to
yeah. You're headed
Tampa.
down to
Yeah, yeah,
Tampa, right?
yeah. Heading
And
to Tampa.
so goals to are you? Do you think you're going to start immediately after you finish, or like
I started
what's the plan?
September, so I got a month.
Okay,
So
couple
obviously
months.
boards
Okay,
are beginning of August, August 5th, and then
yeah,
got a good month there to kind of figure things out. We don't know if we're going to travel or whatnot, or
yeah,
do whatever. So yeah, a lot of January onward is going to be figuring out the move and transition and kind of what we need. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That'll be exciting. Awesome, man. Well, yeah, it's been a while. I feel like it's been a long, long time since we've done this one. So hopefully people are excited to kind of learn about some of the reflections and lessons and we'd love to kind of hear from you guys to see what your goals are and if anything that we've talked about here before has influenced how you've thought about something
Do you
or
want to?
also again feedback for us.
I was going to ask. Did you want to? I know you wanted to talk about holiday dieting and stuff. You know, did you want to get into that
Um,
or?
well, so this is a personal thing, and I think I've heard AC Sinkowski talk about this at some point. It's interesting. because the data clearly shows that most people, you know, I think most people will kind of say they'll gain a lot of weight and then like New Year's resolution, like we've been doing this since the
Mhm.
dawn of time, right? Um, but the data kind of shows that most people end up putting on like a couple of pounds a year after their 30s, maybe a little sooner than that, like, until like
Wow.
they get to their like fifth or sixth decades. But majority of that weight is actually gained in the 6 week period between Thanksgiving and like New Year's.
Wow.
And
Okay.
majority, and people don't end up, most people don't end up losing it, right? Because for the reasons you mentioned, 30s, 40s, it gets to
Yeah.
be far more challenging in terms of priorities and being time poor. And so I think one strategy that I know has been successful for a lot of people, and I'm finding this to be incredibly successful. I didn't think about this until like I was at a holiday party last week when a colleague came up to me like, "Man, you're looking fit." Shout out Ali if she's listening. But and she's like, "What, like, what are you doing? Everybody's going in the wrong direction. You're going the opposite direction." And because I think again, motivation, short-term motivation, I think most people can find that. Like, yeah, let me get on this 30-day thing and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But if you strategically use that 30-day period, understanding that willpower might be limited, motivation might be limited, during the hardest period where the data suggests this, and most people end up struggling being around cookies and stuff like that, um, and you just get through and you weather that storm. I think in the long term, in my mind, I think that might be a really really good strategy, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna quote unquote diet or be really lock it down, mid-November to mid-January, and you just weather that storm and understand that at some point it's going to be hard to continue fighting that, but you're not exposed to the parties and all that kind of stuff. And like, I got a potluck this Friday, and that's
Right.
all that going on this time. So, and again, I've heard this strategy. Uh, it's not my idea, but I've heard this has worked for other people. But now I'm personally experiencing it, and I um, I think it's a smart idea.
Yeah. And also, all for an alternative, because I do like that idea. But like for those who want to go out and enjoy, right? Like some people just can't get out of these like holiday events,
Hmm.
and then the willpower, you're right there. It's like crap. They don't have that hard rule, right? So Tim Ferriss, Shane Parrish, they always talk about have it hard rule. Maybe it's no alcohol on the weekends, but you can enjoy whatever Monday through Thursday, and that way you're eliminating
Hmm.
it from
Hmm.
these parties. Adam Bornstein's book, you can't really screw this up. I mean, I read that about a couple months ago. That's really changed the way I look at my own nutrition. Because, even, I want people to understand, even like with us, right? Body dysmorphia is a thing. Stressing over healthy food and making sure you're getting what you need is stressful. And his whole principle is removing the relationship between what you're eating and the chronic stress that you're building around it. And when you negate
Mm,
that, when you disregard that relationship and you allow yourself to eat and be, have what you want, you actually tend to be more healthy with your other choices. And that was like the biggest breakthrough for me, where I was like, man, I was stressing so much, and that chronic stress in itself is not good. And I've been creating these negative like loopholes, or feedback systems by this chronic stress, thinking about foods that I shouldn't have, and it leads me down, and then I give up and I keep going. And so for those people who like want more information on that, it's a very simple book, nothing groundbreaking, but the principle behind it was like, man, you really can't screw this up. Obviously you got to create rules and things, but don't be so hard on yourself. Goes back to the self-respect and loving yourself.
simple as perfection, huh? Keeps coming back
Yeah,
to you.
that's right.
Uh, uh, Love it, man. Yeah, another thing I think it's worth disclosing for people, and something we're super excited about. So I think most people have known that we've had some amazing interns. So shout out to Harita Yepuri and Ethan Chu, who've been really helping us out and get the word out. And our team's growing. So we've doubled in size over the
Hmm.
last month. And so Zainab Lugmani and Sarah Khan are also going to be helping out. And we've got some exciting things down the pipeline in terms of some content creation that I think as our team, or excuse me, as our team grows, that this experience is going to be valuable for you, the listener. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it, and if you don't and you hate it, you'll let us know sooner rather than later so we can pivot. But yeah, yeah. So I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, man. 2024 looks exciting, promising. So definitely looking forward to it.
All right, buddy.
All
Till
right,
next
man.
time.